When the Confederate Army comes, they don't really have anywhere to go. Well, by the time Grant gets here from Cherry Mansion, there are people. No, I don't think it's Grant. I think it's the night of the 6th when Buell's army comes to back them up. He comes in and there's all these people who've retreated on the banks. There's nowhere left to go, and they're trying to get on the riverboats. They're trying to escape, and they're all like, "What are you doing, you cowards?" But they were just brought back.
Upon arriving, the battlefield's visitor center orients you.
Hardy's interesting. Hardy wrote, he was in the Union Army, the United States Army before, and he wrote a tactical guide on formation, and both armies are using it.
Wow. Thanks, guys.
The Battle of Shiloh is deeply faceted and cannot be quickly described.
So when you see those tablets, a square tablet is the historical information. Those little ornamental square tablets, there's where troops are engaged on the first day, and oval tablets are where the troops were engaged on the second day. You don't hear as much about the second day as you do the first day. Like in books and stuff that I research, I don't know a lot about the second day. And the camps are the little tent-shaped.
National military parks are protected.
Veterans returned to help create this park.
They come back and then they're like, "Oh, this is where Albert Sidney Johnston died." This, you know what I mean? So the survivors come back and
Wow.
and help build the monuments in the park and kind of explain what their eyewitness accounts were of where things happened, what happened. Unions and Confederates got together to preserve this battlefield.
Thank you. Got it.
A few words on battle flags.
Okay, this is important because a lot of times you think that the battle flags are like a rallying thing or a pride thing. The battle flag, in the midst of battle where it's very smoky, they tell you the position of your army and who is where. That's why it's very important when you read a story of somebody, the flag bearer falls, somebody grabs the flag. It's not don't get the flag dirty or don't lose the flag. There's a part of that, but it's mainly this is where we are, these are our guys, this is your focal point.
Very important.
Also, the flag of the Confederacy too closely resembled the American flag, which was confusing in battle. The flag most are familiar with is the battle flag, used only to identify who was where. Here is a map of the battlefield. It shows the enormity of the area. Stacy, a history major, well educated on the Civil War, studies.
Wallace is here. Wallace, he wrote Ben-Hur.
Oh.
He takes the wrong road. So he's supposed to meet the army while it's fighting. He takes the wrong road and then has to kind of backtrack, and he doesn't get there in time to fight on the first day.
Oh.
And he spends the rest of his life trying to clear his name. He does very well on the second day, though. But that's a big controversy from the battle. The Hornet's Nest is very famous. It eventually becomes like Union soldiers here, and they're just surrounded by Confederates. And there's a little bit of confusion about like holding the field. They didn't retreat in time, so like their commander W.H.L. Wallace, he perishes. Peabody perishes, but Prentice survives, and then later on he kind of tells the story of the Hornet's Nest where he's kind of the hero, so there's still There's still controversy around that too. Ruggles Battery is famous. There's a bunch of cannons. I think that's still there today. Artillery is very interesting to me.
Stacy's always had a soft spot for tanks. Which we learned in day trip.
And Peach Orchard's famous. I don't really know what happened there. There's General Johnston.
The interesting thing is that Stacy can look at this map and know what happened there.
So this is where the Confederates are the night of. It's sort of like our drive up here.
Oh, okay.
Prentice Reconnoitering Party. Prentice was one of the few people that was like, something's up with these Confederate, because there were skirmishes. There were all these skirmishes. Sherman was like, no, you're out of your mind. Nope, because Sherman had overreacted like 6 months earlier, some other thing, and he got a reputation as a crazy overreactor. So now he's sort of overcorrecting. It's like, no, it's fine. But Prentice took it upon himself to get a group of guys together. No, not Prentice, Peabody, who was in Prentice's group. And then when the battle starts, Prentice blames Peabody, like, you're going to be held responsible for starting this battle, but the battle was going to happen no matter what.
On to the exhibits. They have tons of personal artifacts. And photos from the time. Grant was an interesting figure. We'll hear more about him. The cavalry was here, but found no place. Johnston, Confederate general, an awesome leader.
Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard. He's from Louisiana. He takes command after Albert City Johnston is killed.
The ravages of war spared not these people.
Good morning and welcome to Shiloh National Military Park. Our first program of the day, Why Shiloh Pittsburgh Landing, will begin in 15 minutes at 10 o'clock. You'll meet the park ranger at the gates of the National Cemetery, where they will discuss the events that led to the battle and the reasons why the battle was fought here. Once again, our next ranger-led event for the day, Why Shiloh Pittsburgh Landing, will begin in 15 minutes at 10 o'clock.
Cannoneer number 2 received the round and delivered this.
Here's an actual drum that was found abandoned on the battlefield. The drum is very important. This heading is this, it's the long roll. That's the call to battle. So if you're in your tent and you hear the long roll, you gotta get dressed. You gotta get information. The drum is the heartbeat of the Army.
I want to point out this kid.
This is John Clem. He was a 10-year-old soldier. He did not fight in Shiloh. His unit wasn't deployed until 3 months after the battle, but he was in the Army his whole, like, he grows up. You can see pictures of him young and then older and then really old on Wikipedia. So he ran away from home at 10 and joined the Army.
It's interesting because just recently Robert with Sidestep Adventures found like an 11-year-old soldier's grave, probably on the
I
Confederate
think
side.
John Clem's like on record as being the youngest, and he could not unless he just sort of took up with the Army, and they let him be a drummer boy, and eventually they let him join.
Wow. I'd like to point out here where it says thousands of casualties on both sides, which overwhelmed the limited resources of regimental surgeons. And this is an important point because, you know, when we're talking about like slavery and stuff like that, it was addressed in buckets of blood from 1861 to 1865.
Yeah, the night of April 6th, there was a little log house, and General Grant went there to sleep, but they were using it as a hospital, and it was such a horror that he just left. And it says in his autobiography, "I just went back to my tree in the rain."
Here we see the faces of those who endured this hell on earth.
Good morning and welcome to Shiloh National Military Park. Our next Ranger-led event for the day, Why Shiloh Pittsburgh Landing, will begin in 10 minutes at 10 o'clock. You'll meet the park ranger at the gates of the National Cemetery, where they will discuss the events that led to the battle and the reasons why the battle was fought at this location. Once again, our next Ranger-led event for the day, Why Shiloh Pittsburgh Landing, will begin in 10 minutes at 10 o'clock.
Oh, there's Tuttle. We saw his.
Yeah. So we're going to watch the movie. I'm probably not going to film this because, well, you know, but respect for others. So we just left the visitor center and we saw the movie. I'd like to have shared the movie with you, but you can't really film.
It's on YouTube. It's called Shiloh Fiery Trial.
Shiloh Fiery Trial. Commit that to memory. Once you're done watching this video, type in Shiloh Fiery Trial and watch it because it's really good. It's really important. We're marching across the grass here. Let me give you a little. We're heading this way to get a demonstration of muskets. This talk is interesting and ends in musket fire.
Okay, this war of Civil War, why in the world did this thing happen? Well, in 1860, December the 20th, 1860, Union officer Robert Anderson controlled the forts surrounding Charleston Harbor. And December the 20th, 1860, South Carolina seceded from the Union. So they now believe that everything that was in the forts, everything that the Union officers had, belonged to the state instead of to the government. Well, Washington and Abraham Lincoln disagreed. Robert Anderson was given permission. Now, Fort Sumter was not built at the time this was happening in December 20th, 1860. It was being built. It was a huge fort. Its walls were 50 feet tall and 10 feet wide. It was almost complete. Robert Anderson was given permission by the federal government to move from Fort Moultrie in South Carolina, which is a much older and less defended fort, to Fort Sumter. So on the night of April the 26th, he moved himself and 84 soldiers from Fort Moultrie to Fort Sumter. Now, by March the 1st, General Pierre Gustave Trudant Beauregard Say that again for me. No.
Beauregard.
Beauregard's close enough. Had it become commander of the artillery around Charleston Harbor. He knew that Abraham Lincoln was going to send a defensive supply ships to Charleston to help keep Fort Sumter and Fort Moultrie. He sent 2 captains out to Fort Sumter under a flag of truce and asked Robert Anderson to surrender the fort. Robert Anderson says he has no authority to surrender the fort. He says, but if you will not batter to pieces this fort, we will be without food in 2 days. Well, the flag-bearing Confederates went back to their bases, their officers, and they said, well, if Robert Anderson will tell us what date he is willing to surrender, we will not fire on that fort until that date. But the Confederates were guarding the coastline. They could see the supply boats. They could see the gunboats getting closer and closer to Charleston Harbor. So they sent that under a flag of truce 4 officers out to Fort Sumter now and asked Robert Anderson to surrender. He says, I cannot surrender if I get supplies or if the gunboats come in. I have no authority to surrender. I am obligated to fight for my country. Well, that was on April the 11th. On April the 12th, at 4:30 in the morning, knowing that the recovery and the relief gunboats were getting closer and supply boats, the Confederates opened up on Fort Sumter at 4:30 in the morning on April the 12th, 1861. They fired those cannons for 34 hours at Fort Sumter. Now on April the 14th, Robert Anderson had to surrender Fort Sumter. Now the Confederates let him fire his cannons off. After 34 hours of firing cannons back and forth, not a single soldier was killed on the Confederate side nor on the Union side. Now, you had to be 18 years old to join the Army. Okay? Now, 10 to 20% of the Army from both sides made up soldiers under 18. What they would do is they would write the number 18 on the sole of their shoe. And when that recruiter came by and asked, are you over 18? He says, I'm over 18. He's standing over 18. 10 to 20% of both armies were under the age of 18. If they knew a battle was going to take place the next day, they would sit around the campfire singing religious songs and praying. They would also be issued a bayonet. Bayonets have several uses. If you're cooking something on the fire, you can reach down with this and pick it up, set it down somewhere else, and let it cool. Okay? You can stick a bayonet in the ground, put a candle in the top of it to write letters at home or to read letters from home. This is called a musket ball. Most of the Southern officers would have musket balls because they were poured just a round little ball. The accuracy to a musket ball was 65 to 85 yards. Now it would go further, but the accuracy. So a good soldier could shoot 3 times a minute. Now if I'm in line with 1,000 men on this side of the field, and there's 1,000 men on the other side of the field, if you're shooting 3 times a minute, you're just loading and shooting off and not trying to aim anything. I'd much rather have somebody that takes their time, loads, look at their target that's moving, trying to shoot you, and take their time 2 shots a minute is fine. 3, there may be a competition to see how fast you can do it. Fire! All right. Now that's what they would do. Spin 9 times load, grab your weapon here, twist it right in the cone of your feet, slap your cartridge box, handle cartridge. Now again, you get that right up to your mouth, tear cartridge. You have to get into the black powder. If I come out looking like I've got a mustache, that's why. Charge cartridge. Draw rammer. Ram cartridge. All right, the next one is prime. I'm going to come up, cock it 1 time, take the old percussion cap off, put the new percussion cap on. Now I'm going to step back. Ready. Pull the camera all the way back. Aim. Fire.
One more time.
Ready. Pull the hammer all the way back. Aim. Fire. All right. Thank you very much for coming on this program today. I appreciate you very much and hope you enjoy your tour at Shiloh today.
I think Stacy just said this is Grant's last line.
Now, all of the troops fighting in the front at the beginning of the day wound up at this position right here. This was Grant's last line. This road goes right down to Pittsburgh Landing and is about 200 yards from the Tennessee River. And this is Stone's Battery.
Cool.
Which was fighting in W.H.L. Wallace's division. So. All right. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Now, you can walk through the cemetery and walk right down to the river. You can turn right at this intersection, stay to the left because 3 of the roads are one way. Stay to the left, you can drive right down to the river.
Okay.
Instead of walking. Now, it's an easy walk down. It's the one back up that gets you. Okay? All right.
Thank you. That was fantastic.
This was really good.
Yes, it was.
There were innovations in the Civil War that get taken to World War I. Sort of going off her question, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because they did not dig trenches here. But by the time you get to like Petersburg and the crater, there's all kinds of like.
Chickamauga Earthworks.
Yeah, the earthworks.
It's often hard to imagine that in these peaceful, serene pastures, 150, 160 years ago, such mayhem.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful spring day. There's letters, and documents where the soldiers talked about, like, the birds singing, and you can hear the birds singing, and the spring flowers. So after the battle with the dead horses and the dead men and the spring flowers, there was a smell that, like, haunted them, because it was just, like, the sweet smelling flowers and the smell of death, and it was, like, uncanny and really horrible.
So that was a great demonstration. Now we're heading to the cemetery.
Important. And a word on Confederate dead and the importance of monuments.
Confederate dead remain in war graves, mass graves. I think it's important to notice that after the Civil War, Southerners had a path to citizenship, but if you died in battle, you did not have that path, and you did not have that respect, and you were not interred. If you lose the battle, you're not in a grave like this, you're in a mass grave. And a lot of times, grieving family members didn't have a grave to go to.
So their solution was often to have a Civil War monument built in the town or someplace they could go. So this idea that it's only the KKK that sponsored Confederate memorials is not true. It's not always true. That's kind of like a narrative where they've kind of overrun this idea of actual grieving families and actually, dead people. I know another one where they don't mention the KKK, but it just
No, I'm leaving it in there.
it bothers me. We're super close to the river. You still can't really see it. We're gonna walk.
The muffled drums, sad roll has beat the soldier's last tattoo. No more on life's parade shall meet that brave and fallen few.
Yeah, so like the long roll is called the battle. There's also like muffled drums for death and burial.